Is there going to be new light about the cross? I don't know. Every so often I'll get like a DM or an email, and someone will attach a picture. It'll be from a new Watchtower magazine, looks like this, and they'll kind of have this hypothesis that Watchtower is just now starting to get closer and inching their way to accepting the cross again, because they used to do previously back in the 1800s, and then they stopped. And I always kind of scratch my head a little bit, because if you just go back through the archive, you can basically find in every single decade rough facsimiles of this picture. I'll just put one up on the old green screen since I still have it out. And yeah, this isn't anything new or terribly novel. But the reason I wanted to make a video about this topic is the absolutely hysterical, and I mean it is really funny, way that Watchtower actually tries to manipulate scholarly sources to make it seem as if Jesus really did die on a stake and not a cross. Because normally what Watchtower does is they do this game where they say, some scholars say, or some experts agree, and phrases like that, but they don't actually source it. Watchtower, they made a bit of a mistake, and they actually source when they're talking about the cross. And if you go and check some of those sources, hoo-wee, it's pretty embarrassing. So, Watchtower, I'm going to bend you over my knee for the next 20-30 minutes and give you a good old spanking. Get that image in your head. Imagine Stephen Okay, we're not going to do this. There's going to be some AI deepfake. Run the intro. Hello and welcome back to the JW Thoughts channel. My name is Wally, and today we are talking about the cross. Quickly before we get into it, don't forget to drop a like on the video. It helps it out immensely, get to more people on YouTube, helps the cause, helps the community, and it's very much appreciated by me. I'm a vain creature at the end of the day, and number go up make me feel happy. So make Wally feel happy. I don't know why I started talking like a 2-year-old. Anyway, with all of that being said, let's jump into this thing. Now, first off, just to lay a bit of a foundation, if you've never been a Jehovah's Witness or only loosely associated with them, the cross and the rejection of it is something that Jehovah's Witnesses are very proud of. And I think it's because it's something that's like easy. They can like see it. It's on churches. People wear necklaces and different things like that. And it makes them feel special. This is a favorite activity of wacky, goofy religions or cults, however you want to, whatever nomenclature you want to assign to them. And I kind of call it like the blue hair effect, where if you're this goofy religion cult, you need to do something unique to make yourself feel special. And it's a lot like a high schooler, trying to find their identity, and they want to do something kind of goofy and kind of crazy just to help make them unique. And so they'll dye a strand of their hair, a section of their hair blue or something like that. And this is Watchtower's blue streak that they put in their hair. They reject all of false Christendom with their ugly crosses, and they are all about that pole life, baby. So just so you know, like, this is something that is rather important to Jehovah's Witnesses, but from personal experience, when you walk them through what I'm about to show you, they somehow forget that this is so important, that it's a sense of pride, and like, well, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. We don't really know. It's a very strange activity that they participate in, but I just wanted to like lay that foundation there for you. So here we're going to look at the Bible Questions Answered section on jw.org. And this is just, did Jesus die on a cross? So many view the cross as the most common symbol of Christianity. However, the Bible does not describe the instrument of Jesus' death, so no one can say its shape with absolute certainty. Now, this is a bit of a departure from their way that they talked about it, through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and I would hazard a guess to say even like the 2000s, and maybe they switched it up in 2010. But they used to be very certain with how they talk about it. They're at least giving themselves some wiggle room. So no, I don't think like the pictures themselves are any evidence that Watchtower might be getting closer to accepting the cross again. But stuff like this would be something I would consider a more interesting, something to throw in the old evidence bin. So the Bible does not describe. Still, the Bible provides evidence that Jesus died not on a cross, but on an upright stake. So yes, you can't be certain, but they're going to give you their reasons. The Bible generally uses the word stauros when referring to the instrument of Jesus' execution. Although translations often render this word cross, many scholars agree that its basic meaning is actually upright stake. And then if you click on the footnote, it says, "The New Bible Dictionary, 3rd edition, edited by D.R.W. Wood, page 245. Now, if you want to go to archive.org, you can do this completely for free. It will take you about 35 seconds, at least that's what it took me, and you can find this exact source, this exact reference that Watchtower is giving to try and give people the idea that scholars think that this word should only be meant to be upright stake. Well, boy howdy hey, Watchtower, you shouldn't have put the source in there because, like I said, I spent the 35 seconds and looked at the reference and it's comical. So the point that Watchtower references here is this first part, the Greek word for cross, stauros, the verb, I don't really speak Greek or Latin, so I'm not even going to embarrass myself, means primarily an upright stake or beam, and secondarily, a stake used as an instrument for punishment and execution. It is used in this latter sense in the New Testament. And then on the very next page, there's an artist's depiction, a recreation based off of archaeological evidence around the time between, I believe this was dated between 6 and 66 CE. So at the time that Jesus would have been crucified, here is an artist's rendition of the archaeological evidence and what it could have looked like there. And in this, he keeps on referring to it. I don't know if it's a he actually, but I think it's older, so it probably is. But we'll just say they keep referring to it as being crucified, dying on a cross. There is nothing in this to indicate that they are sticking with the primary definition as an upright stake, because it has a secondary definition that would be applicable in cases where a criminal is being charged and killed. And in that instance, I don't know why this makes me giggle, because it's just pure lunacy. In that instance, that is the definition that would be most appropriate, because Jesus was, crucified as a criminal. It's very basic. And this is in Watchtower's own references. You can look it up yourself. If you're trying to talk to a Jehovah's Witness, you can just show them and be like, why is Watchtower quoting sources and trying to make it seem as if these scholars agree that Jesus died on an upright stake, when it just doesn't mean that. But that's not our only example. So right after that footnote, it says, according to a critical lexicon and concordance to the English and Greek New Testament, stauros, quote, never means two pieces of wood joining each other at any angle. So this is a 19th century work by a dude named Bullinger. And Bullinger wasn't really popular because he was a hyper literalist. Some kind of thought he was a bit crazy. You can look it up yourself. Again, this is all very easily searchable, but he is not a well-respected, well-regarded historian or scholar, because he has biases. And when you have a lot of biases, you end up like Watchtower, where you can just say things, close your eyes and plug your ears and say, nope, I know it's true because I said it's true, so therefore it's true. And it's a very, very goofy thing to get engaged in. And if you go and look at more respected and authoritative Greek commentaries, you will be extremely hard-pressed to find any, and I mean any, evidence that this is simply an upright stake. And a curious case happens when we just read a little tiny bit further, because Watchtower fails once again. So just to, look at the scorecard here. They give you some bogus information about this word basically meaning something, which is just nonsensical. Even the sources that they quote for that don't agree with the point that they're trying to make. Then they quote a completely laughed at and disregarded scholar who no one really takes very seriously because they don't actually do good scholarship. There's too many biases in their work. And then they go on to just do something even funnier. The Bible uses the Greek word xylon as a synonym for stauros. This word means wood, timber, stake, or tree. And they said the Companion Bible thus concludes, there is nothing in the Greek of the New Testament even to imply two pieces of timber. Again, they are quoting from someone that is trying to prove a point that no one regards as being serious. But there is another footnote that they give there, and they say, see the Expanded Vines Expository Dictionary of the New Testament and a Greek-English lexicon by Liddell and Scott, 9th century, pages 1191 and 1192. So if you go and check out these references, what will you find? Well, they're a little bit tedious, but again, you can find free versions. You don't have to just trust me. I mean, you can. I don't have any skin in the game. I'm not hawking $40 t-shirts or selling some guru YouTube course how to improve your life. I'm not on my hands and knees begging you to donate money. I'm just a guy. I'm just a guy that grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, has a little bit of an interest in this ex-Jehovah's Witness community, and is trying his best to help people. That's all. No agenda, nothing like that. So if you don't trust that guy, that's fine. You can go and trust the people with an agenda. It's your time. Do what you like. But yeah, you can check all of this out and verify all of it for yourself for free. So in this quote from the Liddell, Scott Jones, when they're saying that this word xylon means wood or timber, that's true. But in that work, if you look it up, it specifically mentions that in the Roman execution context, this word should be translated as a cross. So if we're talking about serious scholarly work, as far as I can tell, that when you're talking about execution and punishment, you can do all of this. Well, this word actually means this. The context matters. How was the word being used? And if the word was being used in a execution context, then that should be translated as cross, because that is how he would have actually been punished. Now, the last thing, I can't remember if I even read this now. I believe I did, but it mentioned the Companion Bible. Thus concludes, there is nothing in the Greek even to imply two pieces of timber. What Watchtower doesn't tell you is that this is from their old pal Bullinger. Yes, they are just reusing the same guy, but trying to make it look like it's a different work. If they would have said, this is Bullinger's opinion, and then you requote Bullinger again, it's like, so have you just got one source from this one person that no one takes seriously? Is that your source? The equivalent of trust me, bro? So yeah, this is absolutely absurd behavior from Watchtower. They have to intentionally go out of their way to misrepresent what actual scholars say. They have to intentionally go out of their way to misrepresent historic and archaeological evidence to support their blue hair. That's honestly, at the end of the day, this is just what cults do best. They just do goofy, crazy, zany things, and they hope no one actually goes and checks some of the references that they use. Now, one of the other reasons that Watchtower will give for not using the cross is that there is no biblical evidence that first century Christians, used it in worship, and that might be true. I don't think that there is any extant evidence showing that they did use it. But if you actually go and look at the Bible, a lot can be inferred from that. And what Watchtower does is they say, well, there's no evidence because we've mistranslated the Bible. But if you only think that their translation of the Bible is correct, then I suppose, sure, there's no evidence. So I'll give you one example of where it is talked about, and without thinking of it as something that had some sort of significance to the first century Christians, this verse doesn't actually make any sense. So this is in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 18. For the speech about The torture stake is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is God's power. So when you translate this torture stake, okay, so if they didn't want it to be associated or revered or looked up at, why is he referring to it as God's power? Why is he talking about the speech of other people who don't understand the torture stake as being just foolishness? Do you need to go out, Goose? Okay. What's up, buddy? So why is this in the Bible itself? Why is he referring to this torture stake for those who know as God's power? Well, if you've mistranslated that as torture stake instead of just reading it as the cross, we'll just go down the line here. The third reason that a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses will give, and it's a funny little illustration that they use, and they always say everything's an illustration even when it's not an illustration, but an illustration that they use is, well, say you had a family member that was killed with a gun or knife. Would you wear that knife or that gun around your neck as a piece of jewelry? Would you put it on top of your house and worship that thing? Obviously not. Then why did the first century Christians say, but to us who are being saved, it is God's power? If that is a good reason, and you're always going back to, well, what did the first century Christians do? That's how we get back to the real, true way of worshiping the real, true God. Then why is there, this isn't the only one, by the way, why are there biblical passages that directly contradict this goofy notion that you guys have that makes you feel special? And again, I think Watchtower knows all this. I think this isn't something that's like a brain blaster. It's something, we'll just go back to an old 90s, is it 90s? Probably early 2000s commercial. It's so simple a Jehovah's Witness could understand it. Shout outs, well, no, I'm not sponsored by them. I'm not going to give any shout outs to a company, but the commercial so easy a caveman could do it. That's the reference. That's the joke. I'm just yapping at this point. All right, and if Watchtower's Fanny isn't red enough, let's just go in for one last good old slapperooski. There's a picture here, and it is sourced from the book The Cross, Tradition, History, and Art. And this is a book that's written by someone Watchtower likes to quote quite often. They have when you start doing a lot of research and stuff, you kind of see the same scholarly names pop up over and over again. And you start to see the pattern where Watchtower relies on these scholars who are pariahs in their field in order to justify some of their claims, which is exactly what you would expect of, them trying to cobble together this information that most other scholars reject. But this work, I haven't read the whole thing, so I can't say definitively, but it is in the public domain. You can find versions of it online for free. It takes 30 seconds, but I spent a good couple hours perusing this thing to just try and educate myself and understand what this thing is, because they do show this picture. And if you're someone that's just looking at this on the surface level, you might come to the conclusion, oh wow, look, here's obviously this is what scholars think actually happened. But that's not really the case. What this book seems to be is an opportunity for Editing Wally to step in here and change the game plan. So initially I had just kind of talked off the dome, as I often do, about what I had read when I was doing research for this video. But I think actually showing some of the passages is a little bit more interesting than I initially gave it credit for. And it really just puts the nail in the coffin. I should say the nail in the cross. Haha, jokes. It puts the nail in the cross of just how manipulative Watchtower can be when they're trying to prove a point. And I say this all the time in my videos, but if you want to understand Watchtower, just know that they are the type of annoying, ridiculous person that starts with conclusions and then fills in the blanks after that. And it's just another perfect example of exactly that. So this is in chapter 10, and it's talking about the Puritans' opposition to the cross. Like many errors recorded in the history of Christianity, this arose from men's being righteous over much, which is funny because that's a very common Jehovah's Witness expression. The opponents of the cross being among those who in all ages of the church have claimed to be more holy, more pure than their fellow Christians. Hence, we are compelled for the sake of truth and uniformity to class all objectors to the use of the cross under the title adopted by their latter followers as Puritans. And it goes and gives the whole story, history. This book is the history of the cross, all the way from like crosses in ancient Egypt and across all different civilizations. It in no way anywhere suggests that Jesus didn't die on a cross. I mean, quite the contrary. It actually gives reasons and points about why the people who reject the use of the cross are wrong. So again, this is just Watchtower stitching together some disparate points. So like, again, it's just another example of how desperate they are to try and prove something that just isn't there. So again, if you are looking for something that is easy, that is simple, and free to show a Jehovah's Witness how dishonest the Watchtower organization, the governing body, is in presenting their arguments, you might be hard-pressed to find an easier one to use. Like, I believe that any random person on a Tuesday afternoon could spend a couple of hours, gather, a little research packet, present that to a Jehovah's Witness, and then say, so now what, bud? But if you do this, I believe what a Jehovah's Witness will say is what I said at the beginning. Well, it's not really that big of a deal. I mean, we can't really say for sure. I mean, look at the question, the Bible questions answered. It says we can't really say for sure. We all know that that's just some hard copium. But that leads to the general question, will Watchtower ever actually make this change eventually? And that's like, I don't know, we're getting into the field of putting on the old tinfoil hat and trying to figure out what's going on here, but I could see them doing it, honestly. There's not really a lot of reasons not to, other than the embarrassment of having been anti-cross for so long. If they had been more open to other religions and their usage of it, and it wasn't such a deep, and I mean deeply, like, felt thing. I just remember being a Jehovah's Witness, and you really felt like a disdain for the cross, and it was just this ugly, I could never imagine that. We'll take off the hat for this one. But then I remembered, how did I feel about blood? That's exactly the way that I felt about the medical use of blood. And if I were to ever be in some sort of accident or needed to use someone else's blood or even my own blood, I signed and carried in my wallet for my whole life until I left the organization a durable power of attorney, that stated explicitly that I would not accept a blood transfusion under any circumstances. And Watchtower changed that. It's hard to say that something else wouldn't be on the table, like the cross. Like when you first mention it, like, oh, well, Jehovah's Witnesses start using the cross. At first, you might think, oh, there's no way. That's crazy talk. That's nonsense. They would never do that. Same thing with Christmas, same thing with birthdays. But man, I have to keep going back to the blood one. I mean, that is such a massive whopper to backtrack on and to flip-flop on, where people can go ahead and receive blood and just that's the medical thing, and Watchtower has nothing to say, and then they make a law and they say, okay, boom, we're no longer doing this thing. Chaos ensues, questions from readers, however many tens of thousands of people lose their lives as a result of this, and then they flop back. If they can flip-flop on blood, is it so crazy to think that they might flip-flop on the cross? They used to have a cross on the Watchtower magazine. It was right there. It was on the cover. I could actually see them flip-flopping on this. Will they? I don't know if there's a lot of like reason for them to, and that's maybe what my bigger objection would be, is like, well, it doesn't serve them any function other than not wanting to have blue hair anymore. Maybe they grow up and are like, you know, maybe this little streak of blue hair thing was a bit of a phase, but I'm not really about that blue hair life anymore. I have nothing wrong with blue hair, by the way. It's the easiest thing that came to my head. Maybe they just don't want to have that look and they want to be more normalized. That, I think, could be a reason that they change this. But why Watchtower does things is up for everyone else to kind of decide on their own. There's no real definitive answer to that, I don't believe. So anyway, that's about all I got to say for this one. Hopefully you found it more interesting than you might imagine. I was actually going to, now that I'm sitting here thinking, I was actually going to reference the Julia thing. Maybe I'll save that for a different video where they just like mistranslate something. Yeah, it actually ties into this one. I'll do it in a different video. I know I did it before, but that's been like 4 years ago, so I wanted to revisit the topic. Anyway, I'll do it in a different one. Anyway, I don't know why I'm yapping. You probably aren't even watching anymore. Peace. Stay safe. Be kind. And don't forget to spend more time loving the things you love than hating the things you hate. And go out there, like outside, and have a good ass day.